that has more than 400 offices, advising offices in 180 countries over the world. And in those offices, they have advisors like me, and we do provide accurate and comprehensive information about U.S. education system, application procedures, documents required for admission at the U.S. universities, and we guide students on their way of applying to U.S. universities with the application documents and with the testing and everything. So if you will have any questions regarding that, you just feel free to contact EducationUSA office here. We are located at Caspian Business Center. I'm leaving these flyers over here. You can take it at the end. So, and here I wrote a list of upcoming events for you. So after student visa presentations, you can easily, freely attend all the presentations and get more information about studying in the US, application documents, mock interviews, essay writing tips, and everything, okay? So, today we're going to talk about student visas, and it's not me talking about student visas because we have a person from US Embassy Consular Section, Consular Chief Jeremy Little, and I will give the floor to Jeremy. Mr. Jeremy will be talking about student visas today. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for coming this evening. It's a good opportunity for me to come to our nice American Center. This is a great facility with lots of great materials, and I was walking around looking at the pictures and looking at the information about Black History Month, looking at the books here. And we really tried to make this a good place where you can come and find out about the United States, where we can have some good cross-cultural exchanges. And of course, we also like to talk about visas here as much as possible. Talk about the process of applying for visas, sort of the things that some of the opportunities that are available in the United States, and certainly some of the best opportunities are with our student visas. Student visas are one of our most important ways of doing cultural exchanges and outreach to people in different countries, and certainly here in Azerbaijan, we're always looking for more people that are interested in coming to the United States to study. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the application process for visas. This may seem a little bit boring, but people always have questions about just the right way to apply for the visa. But we'll also talk a little bit about what it means to study in the United States and how to determine if studying in the United States is right for you, and where should you study in the United States, and what kinds of programs may be available, where can you go for additional information if that's something that you'd like to do. So just to start off with, can everybody understand me okay? Am I speaking a little bit too fast, or does everyone understand? All right.
It's okay.
It's all right. So if I speak too fast, or if you need me to repeat something, or something's not clear, please just raise your hand and ask me to repeat, and I'm happy to. We have a bit of information to get through with this presentation, but I don't want the presentation to get in the way of me being able to talk to you and you being able to ask questions. So I'd like to move through the presentation, get that information out there, and then let you ask me questions. And just to introduce myself really briefly, my name is Jeremy Little. I am the head of the Consular Section here at the U.S. Embassy in Baku. I've been in Baku for about 2.5 years now. I've been working as a Foreign Service Officer with the State Department for about 9 years now. And I really like working in Baku. This has been a fantastic assignment for me and my family. I've been all over the country. I've been to the north, the south, the west, and everywhere in between. I think Azerbaijan is a marvelous country with amazing contrasts. You can travel 50 kilometers, and the topography and the land changes completely, and then you drive 50 more kilometers, and it changes again. And the culture is wonderful. People have been very, very hospitable to us. So it's been a great opportunity for me to be here, and I've been able to learn a lot about your culture, and I'd be excited for you to have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about mine. So just a little brief overview of our presentation. We're going to talk about the goals of our student visa program in the United States. There's a specific reason why we do so much outreach for student visas, and I'd like to talk about that really briefly. Talk about the student visa process, go through a little bit of the laws and regulations that relate to student visas, and some just related to immigration in general, and then questions if you may have. So generally speaking, when we talk about the goals of my job as a consular officer, I work with visas all the time. People always want to talk to me about how to get a visa to go to the United States. And basically, when I say what's the goal of my job when I interviews for people to get visas or travel or whatever, when we issue the visa, the most important thing that we're concerned about, we talk about this more and more lately, is protecting U.S. citizens and U.S. government interests. So we just want to, when we talk about issuing visas to people, applicants, we just talk, the first thing we look at is keeping America safe. That's a big priority for Azerbaijan too. So then after that, we want to make sure we make it possible for qualified people to travel to the United States for whatever their purpose of travel is. We try to find the right visa for the right purpose of travel. So, and that purpose of travel could be many different things. It could be tourism, it could be to go get some medical treatment, it could be some kind of business purpose, or it can be, in this case today, we're going to talk about studying in the United States. And we try to do this process as efficiently as we can. We're in the United States, we're all about efficiency. Getting the job done, getting the right job done in the best way possible. So specifically talking about student visas, broadly defined, we say there are two different types of visas for traveling to the United States. There are immigrant visas and there are non-immigrant visas. So non-immigrant visas are also temporary visas, and student visas are in that classification of non-immigrant visa. And it allows somebody, a foreign national, to travel to the United States and participate in some kind of approved program of study. And then there's the expectation that after completing the program of study, people will return to their home country. So remember, if you apply for a visa during that visa interview, those are the two of the most important things that a consular officer is going to be asking about. What's your purpose of study? Why are you going to the United States? Or what are your goals there? And then how are you going to show that you're going to use that back in your home country? So what do you need to do if you want to study in the United States? The most important thing is you need to educate yourself. You need to find out what the process is. You need to find out where you want to go. What do you want to study? What stage of your life are you at? Are you a high school student that would like to do a high school year abroad in the United States? Are you a potential university student that wants to start university and do a university bachelor's program? Do you want to do postgraduate studies? Do you want to do some kind of English language study in the United States? There are lots and lots of different options. So you need to identify what it is you want to do, and then you need to go online to identify what are the institutions or what are the colleges or universities that you would like that could be potential options. So after you do that, there's going to be lots and lots of documentation you're going to need to gather. You're going to need to apply for your program, gather those documents. Then you're going to need to proceed with the visa application process. We're going to talk about that a little bit. You're going to need to gather the right documentation for the visa application. You'll need to schedule an appointment online, and then you appear for interview. So I talked a little bit about informing yourself. Generally, you can find out a lot about these non-immigrant visa categories and traveling to the United States just by going to one of our two websites. This is our local U.S. Embassy website. There's a fair amount of information there. There's tons and tons of information, lots of information. This travel.state.gov. website if you want to find out. You could spend a lot of time finding out about applying for a visa online. There's information about how many people apply from different countries. There's information about refusal rates and approval rates. There's information about student visas. And go ahead and go online. You'll see. When we talk about non-immigrant visas, most of the visas that we see here in Azerbaijan, when people come to the embassy, they're divided between, I would say, these four classifications. We have the B1, B2 visas. That's probably 80 to 85% of our applicants are applying for B1, B2 visas. Those are classic tourist type visas. If you're going for a temporary purpose, either as a tourist or maybe to go into some business meetings in the United States, some kind of medical treatment, then that's your visa type. F1 visas, this is what we're talking about today. Academic, language studies, some kind of certified program that's a degree program at a State Department certified institution in the U.S. M1 visas are much less common, really very similar to F1 visas, except M1 is more vocation oriented. And the classic example I use for M1 visas are something like pilot certifications. If someone who wants to become go to a flight training and become a certified pilot, most of those fall under the M1 vocation training type of visa. Could be a certified network engineer, something like that. That would qualify as an M1. And then we have exchange visitors. Exchange visitors, I'm not going to go into today, but they cover a wide range of different opportunities. Everything from summer work and travel, you may have heard of that, all the way to postdoctoral research at hospitals or universities, and everything in between. And maybe sometime I'll come in and talk about exchange visas here if there's an interest in that. But when we talk about students, these F or M visas, so there's specific requirements to qualify for this visa classification. You have to be, first of all, accepted by in a school that has a certified program. There are thousands of these institutions in the United States, and every single one of them has to be recognized by the State Department as somebody that can issue a SEVIS number to applicants. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. So you have to be accepted. You also you may or may not be aware of this, but it costs money to study in the United States. It's actually compared to Azerbaijan, it's actually pretty expensive. So when you come to your interview, you're going to have to show that you have sufficient funds to pay not just for the school expenses, and that includes tuition and books and other incidental expenses, but also pay for the cost of living in the United States. And depending on where you're at in the United States, that can be that can vary widely. Some places are pretty cheap to live, actually even comparable to or cheaper than Baku, and some places are very, very expensive. You have to show that you have some kind of preparation for your course of study, so the program that you plan to attend is appropriate for you in your life situation. And then you need to show that you have an intent to depart the United States back to your home country after you finish your studies. And I would say all of these things are of equal importance. When I'm interviewing a visa applicant, I'm looking to be able to check off all of these boxes. Everything about this applicant sort of makes sense as somebody who is a real student who's going to go study in the U.S. So this is just this is a list of additional qualifications. I wouldn't be concerned about these so specifically because some of these will vary a little bit depending on what program you're in. So and again, these are exchange visas, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about exchange visas. we can, if you have more questions for me about exchange visas afterwards, I'm happy to answer them. But basically, there's such a wide variety of exchange visas. There's so many different options. If you identify a J program, for example, if you're interested in summer work and travel, then there's a specific set of rules that apply for summer work and travel. And it's very different than if you're a Fulbrighter or if you're a flex student or something like that. But basically, the most important thing is you get this Form DS 2019 that shows that you are in an approved State Department sponsored exchange program. And all the rest will sort of change. Your qualifications for the program will change based on the program that you're going to. English may or may not be required. Some of the programs are paid for by the U.S. government. Some of them are paid for maybe by an exchange partner here in Azerbaijan. Some of them could be very expensive and you'd have to pay for yourself. So all these things are interesting, and we can, if you have specific questions about exchange programs, you can ask me after the presentation. When you come to the interview, these are just some basic things to remember about an interview. And this applies for any visa interview at the U.S. Embassy. You need to have your valid passport. You need to fill out the form. The DS-160 is a form you fill online. You have to pay the fee. It's $160. You need to include a photograph, just basic rules for the photograph. And then for student visas, you need the Form I-20. This is a very important form that's issued by the educational institution in the United States that accepted you. So as soon as they send you your congratulations, acceptance letter, they'll send you this, they'll ask you to provide information to fill out the I-20 form. And that information is going to then be directed into this I-20 form that you're going to present to the consular officer. So they're going to ask you your biographical information, and they're also going to ask for financial information, so you can show the institution or the university or wherever you're going, so you can prove to them that you have sufficient funds so you can study in their program. And what you need to remember is that the university does not verify any of that information. So you provide that information, and then that's included in the I-20 form. Then the consular officer is the one that will verify the information in that form. So financial information, the university doesn't verify any of that. That will happen during your interview. So once you get this I-20 form, the educational institution in the United States is going to issue you a SEVIS number. That's the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. And every student that's studying in a program has a specific SEVIS number that identifies you as somebody who's been accepted to an educational program, and you've paid all the appropriate fees that allow you to be active in the system. So you have an active student status in the system. And this SEVIS number is really important because your SEVIS number stays the same. Even if you renew your visa, even if you're in your program for several years, as long as you're staying in the same program in the United States, you keep the same SEVIS number. And that's how the U.S. government identifies you as a student in the United States. So there's this SEVIS has its separate fee that you have to pay that's in addition to the application fee. So you have to pay the $160 visa application fee. There's a separate SEVIS fee that you pay to register as a student in the United States. And that's $200. If you're accepted to an educational program, the university will tell you when it's time to pay the SEVIS fee. And they'll give you all the information where you can pay online, but this is the website you go to. But you don't have to worry about writing that down because the university will send that to you once you're accepted to a program. So one of the big questions that people always have is, what sorts of documentation do we need to bring to an interview? And this is always a very important question, and it changes depending on what kind of visa you're applying for. So if we're talking about student visas, the most important thing you can bring to the interview is your I-20 form that you receive from the university. Also, the consular officer is usually going to ask for financial information. So we're talking about something that verifies that either you or your sponsor, whoever's paying for your studies, has enough money to support you while you're in the United States. So this could be bank statements, this could be employment verification if your parents are supporting your studies, employment verification from them, a support letter where they attest that they're going to support you and pay for your expenses in America. And any additional information that you think may be helpful for the consular officer to determine that you are a credible student, go ahead and bring that information. The consular officer may not always ask for all the documentation you brought. So sometimes when somebody's applying for a student visa, sometimes they'll want to see lots and lots of financial information if it's maybe a very expensive program that they're applying to, or if maybe I don't quite understand, if there's a question I have about their ability to pay or why they're going to a specific program, I may ask for additional documentation. But one thing I think you should also understand is you don't need to stress out about the documentation too much, because if you forget to bring a specific document, or you didn't realize that you should bring a specific document and you don't bring it, if I need an additional document before I can make a decision, I'll just ask for it and you can send it to us, or you can bring it in later, and it's not a problem. I've never ever refused a visa because someone didn't provide enough documentation. And people think that a lot of times. We'll say someone has refused a visa, and then they send us an email and they say, well, I didn't get my visa because I didn't have enough documentation. And that's never the case. It's never, we don't not issue visas because they say, well, sorry, you should have brought this document, and you only have one chance to bring the document. That's ridiculous. If you forgot to bring the document, you can send it to us. And we realize that your application for a visa is a very important thing. We're not going to punish you just because you forgot to bring a document. Okay? So I think I went through this. So one thing to point out is F1 visas are visas for the actual students themselves. It is possible, if you're married or if you have children, it's possible to bring your dependents to the United States as well, and they would apply for F2 visas or M2 visas. So spouses, children would apply for M2 visas, and you need to bring birth certificate, marriage certificates, or whatever so we can verify that they are indeed family members. I'm trying to think. Yeah, this is potentially helpful documentation to bring as well. For example, if you're applying for a graduate program in the United States, you want to go to a master's program, it might be really helpful to bring your transcripts to show and your graduation certificates from your bachelor's program in Azerbaijan to sort of show the consular officer that the program you're applying for makes sense. Most F1 programs require certain English proficiency, so you may want to bring TOEFL exam scores, or it may not be necessary because you may be going for either ESL language or ESL training, or English as a second language, or maybe you're applying for a program that has sort of the language training built into it. So a lot of these things, I would say, use your common sense and think about what would a consular officer need to identify me as a real student, and bring those documents. And again, if you forget something, or the consular officer says, hey, it would be really helpful if you had this, they'll just ask for it and you can send it to us later. So you go online, you schedule an appointment. You have to have your own appointment scheduled in our system so we can expect you and account for you. Sometimes people just walk up to the embassy, they want to do walk-in appointments. Sorry, we don't do those. And the other thing is, sometimes it can take, usually we can issue a visa 1 or 2 days after the appointment, but sometimes it takes a bit longer. for lots of different reasons. So, for example, if you plan to start a student program in September, probably the best time to schedule your appointment is not the end of August, okay? I would say even the beginning of August might be a little, even that could be a little bit late. Give yourself plenty of time. There's no rule for when you should schedule your visa appointment. But I'd say give yourself several weeks so you can make sure everything's in order. If we need to ask for additional documentation, we have plenty of time to do that. So we can issue the visa and make sure you make it to your program start date in time. So this is all, I think, pretty much common sense. Make sure all your documents are signed, make sure everything's prepared. So when you come to the embassy, this applies for any interview at the embassy. Make sure all of our visa interviews happen in the mornings. So make sure you understand that you're probably going to be at the embassy for a good part of the morning, maybe 2 to 3 hours. And the interview will go pretty fast. You'll spend a lot of time waiting, and the interview will probably be 3 to 5 minutes. And also we expect to be fingerprinted. Okay, I kind of talked about this. We do the best we can to make sure students make it in time to start classes, but like I said, give us plenty of time. And if you have a short lead time, if you're expected to start classes very soon after the interview, go ahead and tell the consular officer that, and we'll see what we can do. We can't make guarantees that we'll be able to get everything done in time, but we'll try the best we can. So our expectations for you, one of the most important things here is to just be really forthcoming about the purpose of travel and your plans in the United States. You should be able to explain, in particular, understand that if you're going for a program where you're going to be speaking English and studying in English, you should expect to conduct your interview in English. And this is actually pretty important. Recognize that in a lot of ways your interview is sort of a test of your English. So you can show that you have great TOEFL scores and all these things, but understand too that studying in the United States in the English language means that you should be able to conduct at the very least a basic conversation and talk about your plans in the United States and your study program. So be prepared to communicate in English and be prepared to be very honest and straightforward. When I do these interviews, I have to ask obviously very personal and very direct questions, and you should be prepared to provide personal and very direct answers. I remember I once had somebody where I said, how are you paying for your program? And the person responded to me and said, that's confidential. And I said, confidential from who? You can't tell me? And they said, yeah, I can't tell you. And I said, well, why are we having this conversation then? Recognize that obviously the questions are personal and they're going to deal with your plans and sort of your life goals and what you want to do, and feel free to talk to the consular officer and explain what you want to do with your program, why it excites you, why you applied to the specific university you applied to, what you want to do after you finish. The consular officer is really looking for you to sort of open up and explain yourself. And so feel free to do that. Something to remember. We understand it's a long and difficult process to go through all this to apply to study in the United States, and in particular applying to a university in the U.S. is very complicated. And you have to submit a lot of documentation to the university. There are university application fees. You have to do essays. You have to do a lot of things. And it may seem that that's a very important process. But understand that just because you're accepted to a university, that doesn't mean that the visa is going to be issued. Understand that lots and lots of people apply to study in the United States, and universities in the United States, their job is to accept people to come study, and most of these universities are actually for-profit institutions. That means they make money. That's why they charge so much. And our job at the embassy is to make sure that we follow the laws in the United States. So we have sort of different goals. Universities accept as many students as they can, and embassies, we're trying to make sure that people who travel to the United States are going for the right reasons and are following the laws. So it's a little bit different goals. So I would also always point out, make sure you don't make your final travel plans. Make sure you don't buy your plane tickets until after the visa is issued. Now, this is something I really need to point out, because I know there are a lot of travel agencies in Azerbaijan that they sell you a whole package. They'll sell you they'll apply for the program for you in the United States. They'll submit your online application. They'll prepare all your documents. They do all these things, and they book your tickets. And they charge a lot of money. Understand that just because a travel agency may have a one package price for your whole visa application, that doesn't mean that when you come to the embassy and because you spent all this money, that doesn't mean that there's a guarantee that the visa will be issued, or it could take a certain amount of time before we can issue it. And this also makes me this is a time where it's really I feel I always need to say, be very, very careful about the local agencies that you use when you apply to travel to the United States. I understand that there are a lot of agencies that have a lot of very helpful work, but I also understand that a good number of these agencies really they don't have your best interests in mind. We understand they're trying to make money from you, and more and more lately, in particular over the last couple of years that I've been in Azerbaijan, I've seen how these agencies have become more and more prominent. There are more and more of them, and I think they're very attractive because people are interested in going to the United States, but they charge very high prices and they make promises that they can't keep. And so I always say, don't go through any kind of agency if you're traveling to the United States for tourism. If you're traveling to the United States as a student, you may need some help submitting your application. I think this facility here is a very, very good place to go. Talking with EducationUSA is they're a very helpful organization. I know a lot of the local agencies in Baku are not doing a very good job of actually helping people out. They're doing a very good job of making a lot of money, but we also know that a lot of them charge a lot of money, but they don't actually register people in classes, right? And then if somebody's visa isn't approved, they don't give a refund, or they give a very small refund. So just be very, very careful when you work with agencies, and make sure that you understand that it actually doesn't cost very much to apply for all these programs. Okay, and agencies that charge thousands of dollars for your application probably don't have your best interests in mind. They're trying to make money. Okay. And I would also add that these agencies that tell you that you need to use their services, a lot of times they actually hurt your chances of getting a visa, because when we see people apply through agencies, we know that a lot of these agencies do coaching services, and so when you see people going through them, it can actually, it can undermine your application, hurt your application to a large degree. So be very, very, very careful. So this is a part of the presentation that everybody has questions about. So I'd like to go through it and make sure everybody understands sort of how I, as a consular officer, make a decision when I'm interviewing applicants. So this is, I'm going to read to you what the law says, and then I'm going to explain to you what the law says, okay? So the law says, every alien shall be presumed to be an immigrant until he establishes to the satisfaction of the consular officer at the time of application for a visa and the immigration officers at the time of the application that she or he is entitled to a non-immigrant status. All right. Can anybody here explain to me what you think that means? Any ideas? Okay, I'll explain to you. This is the law, and it's sort of confusing. This means every single applicant that comes to the window, it's assumed that you are trying to immigrate to the United States. Does that make sense? There's the assumption that you want to go to the United States and stay. And it's your job to show the consular officer, according to the law says it's your job to show the consular officer that you don't want to stay in the United States, you want to come back. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you don't say anything, or you don't provide very much information, then it's easy. We just say, sorry, we can't issue the visa. You didn't overcome, we say, you didn't overcome the presumption of immigrant intent. You didn't overcome it. So you have to provide information that shows that you do not have immigrant intent. Right? So think about that for a minute. And now I want you to imagine if you were a consular officer. Okay, imagine you were in my shoes, sitting on my side of the window. Just imagine what questions you would ask someone if you wanted to verify that they did not have immigrant intent. And the law is really open. There's nothing else in the law besides. Sorry, I'm going to go back to this. There's nothing else in the law besides this. This is everything. The law doesn't say anything about documents. It doesn't say anything about property. It doesn't say anything about family. It doesn't say anything. So it's completely my responsibility to think, well, maybe I could ask for some documents. Maybe I should ask this question. Maybe I should ask that question. So imagine what questions you would ask if you were a consular officer to make sure that someone came back to Azerbaijan. And think about that if you were talking to somebody who's a student. How would you guarantee that someone would come back to Azerbaijan? And it's that simple. So a lot of times we talk about ties to Azerbaijan. And I've tried to figure out the best Azerbaijani translation for this. Alagaler is what I'd say. Sizin alagaleriniz Azerbaycanla alagaleriniz bağlı. Azerbaycanla bağlı alagaleriniz kifayet kadar güçlü. Would you say that?
Yeah.
So what are, you have to think, so the question is, what are your ties? Are your ties strong enough to Azerbaijan? And it could be many things. It doesn't have to be one thing. It could be one thing if one thing is really, if you have one really strong tie. For example, family ties could be really important. But do you think, do you know somebody who's had family in Azerbaijan who's just maybe stayed in the United States? But it could be, but not a guarantee, right? So maybe it's kifayet kadar değil, right? It's not enough. Maybe it could be. In some cases it could be. In some cases it's not. So it's very, it's hard to say. So people always want to know. They want to say, well, what do I have to do exactly to get a visa? And I always say, well, I can't say. It depends on you, and it depends on you, and it depends on every person is different. And so we can't decide until somebody's at the window and they present their information and they explain what their purpose of travel is. So that's all what this is right here. These are all ties. So they have to show that they are established to the satisfaction of the consular officer, they're entitled to non-immigrant status. Applicants are asked to present evidence of family, employment, economic, or other ties to their homes abroad that would compel them to return. So something that's pulling you back to Azerbaijan. So think about what you would do if you were trying to ask somebody questions to really, really verify. And nothing's guaranteed, right? Anything can happen. But this is what we try to do. This is sort of, we say this is not a science. There's no way I can write into an equation